I began cooking in college for fun, just out of necessity. And I did work in a bakery and got a little bit of professional experience there, but really was just voracious in reading books. And I was like, I think I pretty much taught myself how to cook by reading books. But also, I had lots of calls to my mother asking her incredibly stupid questions like, how long do you cook a chicken breast for? And different things like that. And so she was very gracious and spent many hours on the phone with me because I graduated high school in 1993. So between 1993 and 1997, the internet was just beginning. So there was no looking at things on your smartphone or online. It was really all about books. And so I loved going to bookstores and finding just books, and I would read them from front to cover to cover. And I had always dreamed while I was in undergrad that one day when I was like established in my career, which at that point I thought was going to be law, being an attorney, that I would go and take a course like in Europe or somewhere else. That was just kind of like this pipe dream, like, oh, bucket list, one day I'll do this. And I went to law school and did not love law school. And then I ended up getting married and moving from San Antonio. And when I moved from San Antonio, the question was, do I try to pick up law school do I try to transfer and pick it up in a different location, or do I scrap law school and go in a completely different route? And at that point, I was living in Miami, and we ended up moving to Mexico City. And so I like to say that I sold my soul to cooking when I was in Mexico City, just because everything about the culture, the food, the history, the ingredients, it was just completely intoxicating to me. So I was just, you could have stuck a fork in me, I was done. That's it. I was completely in love and enamored, and I thought, gosh, I could do this for the rest of my life.
What do you remember about meals at home with your family? You mentioned calling on your mother. Was she the cook of the family?
Most definitely. My mother was a caterer for 40 plus years, and she was a single mother raising 4 children. So we always had a family from either Honduras or Mexico that was living in our house with us. There was just no other way for my mom to be able to take care of 4 children. So we had lots of picadillo, black beans, rice, tortillas, quesadillas. That was like staple growing up in our house. And then my mom would cook anywhere between like 1 to probably 3 to 4 nights a week, just depending on what her schedule was like. There were times where she might not cook for a whole week, or maybe once a week because she, it was her busy season. But normally we had Sunday night dinners, and we would all help out in some way. And my mom loved to, make a beautiful table. And so dinner time was definitely something that was very routine, very sacred in our house. And so when I moved away for college and living in a dorm and all of that, I realized, oh my gosh, how much I had taken for granted having access to not only the foods that she would make, but the foods that she would bring home from her catering business, having like basically like a whole charcuterie board that you could be noshing on in the refrigerator, or, different smoked salmons or just whatever. But we also, my sisters and I joke that, that we all were also raised on cheese and crackers, because my mom loved just snacking on cheese and crackers. And so we ate a lot of cheese and crackers too.
Yeah.
When you look at a lot of the places that I have lived in or traveled to, the places that have always enamored me, those places come up in my cuisine. And it's like a thread that I tether between different regions of the world that have core ingredients that I would hate to live without. If it's sumac and za'atar from the Middle East, or whether it's amazing avocados and chiles and from Mexico, or maybe it's a specific ají from Peru. It's all the herbs, like all the wild edible weeds, if you will, that come from Mexico, Central America, South America, Indian ingredients, the use of ginger and turmeric throughout all world cuisines. There's just like, I would say that it's what I'm discussing and what I'm describing is really a spice library. And so this idea of a spice library is present in the restaurant. It's always been present in any home kitchen that I've ever had. And it's also this roadmap that I use when I want to cook a particular ingredient, like a seasonal vegetable, but I want to add variety, or I want to add medicinal effect from particular herbs. So any of those things kind of lead me back to this idea and notion of a spice library, and that being a guiding light. So I think that the spices that I use tell a story about the places that I am most fascinated by in terms of their geography, their culture, their history, just any of that.
And remind me again where home is for you.
So I grew up here in San Antonio. I was born in Honduras, and but both of my parents are American. They're from the United States. My father never really moved back to San Antonio. Once they moved in the 70s to Honduras, he never really came back. And so I grew up speaking Spanish my entire life, and I ended up living in Mexico. And Latin America for me is home. I feel very comfortable in Latin America. I understand the culture. I understand the rhythm, the cadence of life. It's different. Just seasons and seasonality is a completely different thing because of the climates, and it's a huge area of the world. But for me, it's kind of like at this backyard. And I've also traveled a lot in South America, and I have family from Brazil, and so I started exploring this Brazilian side of my family back when I was in high school. But I mean, home for me is here in San Antonio. I came back in 2008 to help start the CIA. And prior to that, I lived in Mexico City, Buenos Aires, New Orleans, Miami, Santa Fe, New Mexico, Taos. I've just kind of gone all over. But since 2008, I've called San Antonio home. I had been very much inspired or intoxicated, I even called it impregnated, with this idea that I wanted to that I wanted to bring to fruition, and that was really being part of a solution instead of part of the problem when it comes to healing people with food. And I had been going through something very difficult in my personal life. I divorced. I was now a single mother. I had 2 very small children. I was a full-time chef instructor at the Culinary Institute of America here, as well as a Latin cuisine specialist. And I knew, for all practical purposes, that I was a healthy person. I ran all the time. I ate lots of vegetables. I ate things that you would associate with being healthy. But I knew I wasn't healthy. I knew I wasn't tapping into the true definition of health. And it was right around that time that I was introduced to meditation and yoga. And I began those 2 practices, and they were really life-changing for me. And that led me to something called Ayurveda. And when I found Ayurveda and I understood what my body type was, and I started making little modifications based on eating foods that were either hot or cold, or utilizing certain spices, and really turning on its head what the notion of health that I had understood up until that point, which was a lot of raw, foods that were not cooked and that were raw. And I was wondering, why am I having these stomach issues, or why am I exhausted all the time? And what Ayurveda taught me was to make these modifications for my body type. And when I did that, it was like a game changer. And when I started digging deeper and deeper, I just got completely hooked. And I said, wow, I'm a chef instructor at one of the premier culinary schools in the world, and nobody knows this stuff. And our students need to know this. And I need to share this with people. And I just wanted to, it was like I wanted to continue to rediscover my own definition of health and wellness while helping other people. They say that you get more when you give than when you receive. And I found that to be true. And I also found that to be a really strong path towards healing myself in many ways. So Pharm Table for me was like this outward way of healing the world while healing myself at the same time. Pharm Table began as a meal delivery service, and then it morphed into a restaurant. And so now I run a restaurant, casual fine dining restaurant, and it's just really interesting how the evolution of my marketing and my messaging has gone. People say they want healthy, and people say that's what matters to them. But I have found that over the last 10 years that I have been pushing Pharm Table, and pushing this platform of basically an anti-inflammatory cuisine, I have really had to dial down the health claims and dial up the flavor claims. And I think that it's interesting because I really have to talk more about the ingredients and where they came from, and the farm to table aspect, and less about the health benefits. It's interesting.
Do you think that's because of San Antonio specifically and like our market?
I definitely think so. But like 65 to 70% of my customers are visitors. So only 30% of my customer base is made up of locals.
Wow.
Just think about it. I mean, look at what just happened in the last election. You had this issue of, they're calling it health freedom, the health freedom movement, which is all about people rebuking the status quo of food politics, if you will, taking matters into their own hands. And for the first time, probably ever, you saw granola lefties coming together with people from the ultra-right and them having the same views about everything from vaccines to artificial sweeteners and dyes and different things that are in our foods. It's a very interesting time to be here in, 2025, understanding kind of where we are from a health and wellness perspective. It's really interesting. So regenerative farming is really about soil health. And so there's a lot of different things when it comes to farming that matter. The seed that you're growing matters. Where that seed came from obviously is very important, but what you feed the plant and the health of the soil is absolutely paramount to the health of the plant and also the nutrients that that plant is going to provide to you. And the other aspect of regenerative farming, which is so important, is that when we start talking about climate change and we start talking about carbon sequestration, our soil is really the answer. It is the solution for us to be able to capture more carbon, bring it back into the soil. And there's no amount of electric vehicles or solar panels or wind turbines that are going to sequester carbon. And we have done such a bad job of monocropping and industrializing the way we farm that we have basically raped the soil of all of its nutrients. Soil quality is not what it needs to be, and there are some pretty grim statistics about how many harvests we have left due to the poor quality of soil from overtilling, herbicides, pesticides, monocropping, etc. So that has also contributed to climate change and global warming, because you don't have the soil, which is one of our largest assets aside from water, aside from the ocean, doing the job that it can to sequester carbon and to be a sponge. So it's for the health of human beings that we really want to focus on regenerative farming. I describe it as as organic farming on steroids. So it's not just about going and getting organic soil and organic fertilizer. It's really about creating an ecosystem that is going to nurture not only the plants that you put into the soil, but the trees, and I mean everything it's like a whole underground network. It's all connected. So it's really important, and the more that scientists study trees and how they're all connected, it's really fascinating. But regenerative farming is the only way to farm now and in the future. And so we just have to get everybody on board. People need to stop using things like Roundup and herbicides and pesticides, and governments need to start outlawing them, and we need to take back the health of our own health, as well as the health of the planet. So it's all interrelated. There's a pretty core group of regenerative farmers here in the San Antonio area. There's not many of them. I wish there were more, but there is a solid group, and it's just developing these relationships, cultivating them, and maintaining them. And so every week, it's just kind of like juggling. What do you have? Reaching out to them, let me know what you have this week, and then based on what they have, creating menus around that. So it's very spontaneous, and then obviously you have something like what we are experiencing today over the next 3 days. That's going to have a huge impact. The freezing weather is going to have a huge impact on the amount of fresh produce that I have in the coming weeks.
And are these farms that other community members also have access to? Just like a regular person?
Sure. So all of the people that I buy from also sell at farmers markets, or they have something called CSAs, community supported agriculture. So that's where they have subscriptions, and people buy their weekly subscriptions from them, and then that way people are consuming local seasonal produce.
What are some of the local farms or markets that you work with?
Well, local farmers that I work with Green Bear Farms. I work with actually the San Antonio Food Bank and the Mission San Juan Farm, where we visited. Mitch Hackney, who is running that farm with his team. They're doing a great job. I also buy from Enchanted Acres, which is another regenerative farm, and I also buy from a farmer named John Peterson, who has Wholesome Acres, and also my executive chef. He's out in Poteet, but his family, they're third generation farmers in Poteet, and so I'm now buying some produce from him as well. And then of course I buy from a lot of other farms that sell to a group called Pharm Table, and they're kind of like a middleman, like a distributor for lots of local farmers. I also have a regenerative farmer that sells me lamb as well as pork and they are in Canyon Lake, and they're called Pure Pastures. There's another lamb producer in the hill country called Capra Lamb, who I buy from. And then there's other farmers that I buy from. I buy Akaushi beef from Heart Brand, and they're in Flatonia, Texas. And I also buy Greener Pastures chicken They are a regenerative chicken farmer here in Texas. So it's just, you seek these people out. And then the other thing that I do is I buy seafood from regenerative farms throughout the world. And it's funny because we have this notion about there's really this re-education that needs to take place when it comes to fish and the farming, quote unquote, of fish. We have these like really bad negative connotations with farming and the ocean, but we have a lot more ocean than we do land. And with the population growth going the way it is, there's no way we can sustain our population growth with wild, like, fishing of seafood. We have to farm it and be sustainable with it. Otherwise, we're going to deplete our resources. So I support and I buy from sustainable farms that are doing it right, that are, that have, for instance, salmon, deep sea salmon, sustainable fish farms. Baca Salmon is a group that I buy from, and the quality of the salmon is beautiful. The impact on the ocean is very minimal because they rotate just like you would do on land. They rotate so that they don't disturb the sea floor, and the fish eat a combination of wholesome, like regenerative feed as well as wild krill. And we also buy Kona Kampachi. We buy scallops and oysters, which are basically filters for the ocean. I don't actually serve shrimp in my restaurant because the number of sustainable shrimp farmers is very, very low. There's very few. The whole act of fishing, of shrimping, it really destroys the seabed, and there's a lot of other wildlife that gets caught up in those nets. That is, so it's just and then all they're taking is the shrimp, and so because that practice is not sustainable, I don't serve that in my restaurant.
So there's a lot of options for people to get involved with local farms and ranches and options, not only for any other potential food venture, but also just to feed their family.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, here we are in Texas, so hunting is a real it's a reality. It's a necessity in order to control the population of our wildlife, and so it's also something that I think that is healthy. I mean, if you're going to eat an animal, I think it's good for you to have to go through the entire life cycle of that animal in order for you to really appreciate what had to die to be on your plate, as opposed to this desensitized notion that we have when we go to the supermarket and everything's wrapped in plastic, and it's this desensitized notion of consumption that doesn't really comport with reality.
Yeah.
I think people would eat far less meat if they had to actually slaughter it themselves, without a doubt.
For sure.
The story that I want to tell with our food is a story of basically utilization of resources. For me, it's really important that we use all the plant, not just bits and pieces, but the entire plant, that we use every part of the animal. I mean, just the whole idea is that we don't just throw things into the compost because we have a compost. Yes, we compost, and yes, that's important, but there's there are all these different levels. So food waste is a story that I want to tell with our food. I really want to eliminate food waste. When you start thinking about 40% of all food that is produced between the time of planting and the time of spoilage, 40% worldwide is wasted. And so I have to ask myself, when I said earlier that I want to be part of the solution and not part of the problem, that is it's multi-layered, right? So I want us to really push the limits and push the boundaries on how we source our food, what resources we have to utilize in sourcing that food, trying to source as much as we can locally to reduce our carbon footprint, recycling crates where we can, instead of using cardboard boxes, really thinking about what we can do, again, just to push the limits in terms of utilization of our peels, utilization of scraps that would otherwise go to the compost. What else can we do with them? What other recipes can we come up with? So it's really, for me, it's about reducing waste while maximizing nutrients and creating combinations of foods that actually are amazingly easy for your body to digest, giving you the nourishment that you need in order to have energy, as opposed to giving you something and having you eat something that is going to be so overwhelming to your digestive system that you are going to feel like you have to go take a nap just in order to digest your food. I feel like I've failed you if I do that. I feel like I've failed you if you are going to be more inflamed after eating food, and that is going to aggravate perhaps other conditions that you have in your body that are being aggravated by chronic inflammation. And I want you to feel good. That's really what I want. I want people to feel good, and I want people to feel a connection to a plant or a spice, and have it kind of plant a seed with them, literally and figuratively. I believe people really have to take matters into their own hands. And if 80% of your health and wellness is based on nutrition, why would you not start with food? And I think that once you begin to feed yourself highly nutritious food that is alive and that isn't dead, your body literally starts craving that food. And it's a lifestyle, and it's about, it's a way of life. It's not just a diet. So I think it's really important that we think about the whole circle, the plants, the pollinators, the compost, the farmers, what we're doing every single day to be able to know that we are really putting our resources collectively behind the right way forward, instead of continuing to support a broken system. When I created Pharm Table, I was really, I mentioned to you earlier that I wanted to be part of the solution and not part of the problem. And that is why I launched Pharm Table. And when I read about the City of Gastronomy designation, and I understood what these 17 sustainability development goals that drive all of the Creative Cities designations, I really felt this connection to the designation, because it it was really what inspired me. Trying to heal people on the planet through food. And so our City of Gastronomy designation is about using food and culture, which is the definition of gastronomy, as a driver for sustainable economic development and sharing best practices with the rest of the world, with this network of other cities that we have globally to tackle the same problems and to share with one another. And we had to do a lot of research in our own backyard. We had to define and identify what it was that not only made San Antonio unique, but what some of our biggest challenges are as we move closer to 2040, as we move, as we experience and deal with many of the problems that afflict our community that begin with food. And because of our geography, because of our cultural makeup, food and culture are inextricably linked here in San Antonio. And so it was really this amazing privilege that I had to work with a team, both from the private sector as well as the city, to begin excavating and chronicling all of the things that the city had been doing, in fact, for the previous 5+ years, that really showcased our commitment to using food and culture as a driver for sustainable economic development. And it was Johnny Hernandez who came to me and with this idea that he said, this has to happen. And it was 2017, and 2018 was going to be our 300-year tricentennial, with all of the celebrations that came along with that. And it was one of the most rewarding things I've ever done in my professional career, to work with a very multidisciplinary group of committed and intelligent and talented people here in San Antonio, and really uncover and rediscover so much about our prehistory, the colonial period, and where we are today, and trying to really pitch San Antonio and its problems, its challenges, along with everything that makes San Antonio unique. So it is, it's a great honor to have worked on this project, and to continue to work on this project, and to see how it is changing little by little the identity of San Antonio. And I think that it's a beautiful thing to witness. I am most proud of the independent, chef-driven restaurants that have been founded over the last 10 years and continue to find their home here in San Antonio. I think that we have to support independent, chef-driven restaurants, and it's even more important post-COVID that we really prioritize eating locally, keeping our dollars in a circular economy from the farmer to the producer to the consumer. I think it's incredibly important for us not to lose our flavor, in order for us not to lose our diversity, in order for us to prioritize local food artisans and local culinary professionals. We have to vote with our forks. We have to put money behind these small producers, because it is one of the most important things that we, as both consumers and community members here, need to get behind.